Hello everybody and welcome to TheKabooblesProject. I'm your host Cora. Thank you so very much for joining me as we get into some more sculpting together. On today's episode we're going to be doing a very unusual sculpt. I haven't tried to do something like this before. Some of my sculpts that I've been on a long journey of sculpting over the last 2 years, and I started by sculpting really terrible things. I had no idea what I was doing, and over the couple of years that I've been doing it, I've got a little bit better, and I've started to quite enjoy some of the sculpts that I've been creating. My most favoured are those that feature a couple of characters or a character with an animal companion. And I think the reason is because they have this kind of expressive quality, like an emotive quality. They make me feel something to sculpt them, and I hope they make people feel something to look at them. Like Ivor and Koshi, where Ivor is so cute, like giving Koshi a little bit of the scratches, and Galaxion and his little companion Relix, his little familiar cat. And so I wanted to do something that was expressive and emotive, and that was more, that made people feel something, and that made me feel something to sculpt it. So I decided to sculpt a kind of a love scene between two characters, one being a kind of tiefling woman in this kind of like caught out in the cold with a robe wrapped around her, and her kind of Aasimar perhaps, or at this point I'm kind of thinking maybe she might be like Viking-esque, or like a seraphim or something. It's really tricky to kind of gauge. I was sort of drawing from a number of different inspirations, but I wanted them to be in this kind of close encounter, like embrace, where they're just about to kiss. I thought was really awesome, and you know, with this kind of like staring into each other's eyes and this kind of loving look to them. I really wanted it to be a sort of about connection rather than about romance necessarily, although obviously it has a kind of romantic quality to it. And of course, as always, we start with faces, sculpting both faces into place and getting the kind of relationship between them sort of cemented in the sculpt, and getting their expressions started, making sure we get a good sense of what each of them kind of looks like, and their character and personality a bit, and helping and making sure that like those sculpts look reasonable, they look good, and then putting them in place and starting the work on their main biological forms. And that's where we're going here. Now I know what I really want is this kind of these hand gestures, one that's kind of almost pulling her chin upwards into a kiss, and the other with a hand that's just kind of placed against the cheek, again like in what is effectively a tender moment. And here, I'm sort of thinking that like the sculpt is going to have the seraphim's wing over the back of the tiefling. Over time, we sort of move away from the idea of this being a seraphim, just because like the wings didn't make sense. They sort of pulled the sculpt off balance. The more detail that pulls away from this kind of central pairing of the figures, the more the attention is drawn from where I want it to be, and the more I sort of didn't enjoy it. So I sort of gave up on that and moved into her being more of a kind of warrior woman, a kind of a Viking of sorts maybe. So I wanted to kind of do some braids down the side of her head, which I thought was really awesome kind of hairstyle to do. And I kind of thought that, you know, on the right we have this kind of warrior, and on the left we have this kind of like a much more sort of a like a wizard maybe, or some kind of sorceress perhaps. So I wanted there to be like that contrast between the two characters, even though they're effectively two female characters embracing. So here we're doing some really weird stuff that I haven't really tried to do before. In the past, where I've tried to create sort of like wrinkles and folds in fabric and clothing, I've done that through soft surface, like dynamic topology sculpting. And here, because I wanted them to be kind of very clear, what we decided to do was use hard surface sculpting to create the folds. And that actually worked really well here. I'm sort of surprised at how well it worked. They look quite realistic, and I think it's because, you know, when you've got fabric under a fair bit of tension, the folds that are being created are really kind of long and fine, and they start thicker and they get thinner as they sort of reach the point of tension where they're sort of held, either by a hand or by a shoulder or an elbow or something, where they're pulled against the fabric. And because of that, I think you can create these sort of very beautiful parallel folds in the clothing using like a hard surface sculpting almost explicitly. So do the same thing with the cloak, and it kind of really works, you know. Each finger can be pulling against the cloak, and we just create the hard surface topology so that it follows those lines really nicely, and we can pull in the cloak and pull out the cloak in places where it would be under tension. Really cool. And then we get into some hair around the horns, and for her on the left, I really wanted to make the hair quite clear but a little bit wild too. So we have these sort of these hard surface sculpted hairs that are out of place, and these soft surface sculpted sort of folds in the hair that shoot out in different directions. I wanted her to have a bit more wildness to her hair, and the woman on the right, we're going to have a bit more sort of like a bit more sleek hairstyle that's a bit more firm there, including some braiding around the side of her head, and this kind of big sweeping hairstyle down the back, which I thought was really awesome. So here we are creating the braids using some hard surface sculpting. Those are pretty straightforward to do once you've got the hang of how braids kind of work. You just basically create like points, vertices, and create lines between the vertices that move in a typical direction, and then create an array modifier to duplicate them, and then you actually kind of create another array modifier to duplicate them side by side, and then you rotate them around each other to kind of create the braid, and then you solidify them up to actually create a mesh around them. And that kind of works really well. And here we go for some clothes. On the right hand side sculpt, we create like a nice little jacket. I think she's coming together as a more kind of road warrior Viking of some kind. I really like her actually, and some heavier detail into the fingers here. Working on the nails, of course. Nails are one of those things that's easy to miss in sculpts, but when you add that level of detail, it's just, again, it just pops in a way. It just makes it all feel a bit more realistic. And here, of course, engaging in the use of some eyelashes. Eyelashes often tend to be the last thing I do, particularly on sculpts of women or sometimes of non-binary characters. I think eyelashes can really sort of feminize the face in a way. And so characters that sort of need a touch of that feminization, or where it sort of fits with their character, I really like to add that in. And again, a little bit of kind of jewelry around the place just to finish off the sculpt. And here they are, our sort of forbidden love between two characters sneaking away into the woods somewhere in the cold to kind of steal away a kiss. If you'd like to download this sculpt and print it for yourself, you can do. It's on my mini factory right now, link in the description down below. Thanks very much for watching, and we very much look forward to seeing you next time.